السلام عليكم. أهلا بكم في معهد دمشق.
Assalamu alaikum, kayfa halukum? I hope you're all well. La'alaikum bikhair. So, welcome to today's lesson, which is the second part for learning the essential of Arabic verbs. So, in the previous lesson, we learned about the regular verbs, and now we'll be learning about irregular verbs. The irregular verbs in the Arabic can be defined as the verbs that act differently from the basic patterns in all or some cases. Unfortunately, for most of the learners, the Arabic has many irregular verbs, and these may fall into three categories, which is among the most common one are verbs with va or ya as one of the root letters. Then we have verbs with hamza as one of the root letters, and then we have the doubled verbs where the second and the third root letters are the same. So the first category is the most common, and the verbs in this category are also displayed with some irregularities. To help you remember the irregular verbs, we have chosen a common verbs in each category to illustrate the patterns in which they appear. The verbs you see in the tables and examples in the following videos are those that you will probably encounter on regular basis and will lead to communicating Arabic. باللغة العربية. By studying the way they work and meeting them frequently in spoken and written Arabic, these verbs should help to establish the irregular patterns in your mind. So, the irregular verbs are covered first in the basic tenses, and the later videos will cover the various forms and variations. So, if you need to access the information immediately, you can access that particular video directly, which we will show you how each type of irregular verb behaves in those circumstances. So we would like to generate a general overview, so to tell you how the system works. So first we have the irregular verbs with vowel or ya as the root letter. So vowel or ya are often called weak letters, and the verbs they contain are called weak verbs. These letters do not have a strong sound, unlike letters like ba or kaf, and often drop out of words or become vowel sounds when we put into various patterns. So weak verbs are the largest category of irregular verbs. They can be subdivided into three types depending on which root letter is affected. Verbs with vowel or ya as the first root letter. Then we have verbs with vowel or ya as the second root letter. And then we have verbs with vowel or ya as the third root letter. So vowel or ya as the first root letter are rare and almost completely regular. Verbs with vowel or ya as the first root letter are regular in the past perfect tense. For example, وجدنا علة في البرنامج. وجدنا علة في البرنامج. We found a bug. وجدنا we found علة a bug في البرنامج in the program. Or وعدت الحكومة بتخفيض الضرائب بعد الانتخابات. The government promised a reduction in taxes after the elections. Or وصلوا إلى شيكاغو بالطائرة. They arrived in Chicago بالطائرة by airplane. So in the present and the first root letter almost always drops out completely. For example, yasil, he arrives from the root wasala. Wasala yasilu. Or yajidun, which comes from the verb wajada yajidu. So wajada yajidu. Or she puts, which comes from the root wada. So wada tada. Wada tada. So compare these irregular pattern with this one. For example, yaktub, in the verbs in which the first root letter has disappeared altogether from the stem, leaving behind just the second and third root letters. So the following tables shows the present tense for the verb wasala yasilu. So this table shows the present term for the verb wasala yasilu. Ana asilu. Anta tasilu. Anti tasilina. Huwa yasilu. Hiya tasilu. For the plural, we have nahnu nasilu. Antum tasiluna. Antunna tasilna. Hum yasilun. Hunna yasilna. So now we will discuss the vav or ya as the second root letter. This group of verb contains some of the most commonly used verbs in the Arabic language. They are called hollow verbs because the second middle root letter is often replaced by a long or a short vowel. So the hollow verbs in the past, they have a long a sound instead of the middle root letter for huwa, hiya or hum. For example, kana from the root kun, zarat from the root zur, ba'u from the root bay, tara from the root tir. The other words of the verb have a short vowel instead of the middle root letter. This is usually a damma if the middle root letter is a va, and a kasra if it is a ya. For example, kun, kuntu, zur, zurna, bir, birtum, tir, tirti. So we have now examples of some sentences. كان مريضا, he was ill. طارت الطائرة فوق الجبال, the airplane flew over the mountains. هل بعتم بيتكم في نيويورك, have you sold your house in New York? زرنا المكتب أمس, we زرنا المتحف أمس, we visited the museum yesterday. So now this table it summarizes the past tense for the hollow verbs. أنا زرت, أنت زرت, أنت زرتي, هو زار, هي زارت. And similarly for طار يطير, it becomes أنا طرت, أنت طرت, أنت طرتي, هو طار, هي طارت. And when we come to the plural form of these verbs, نحن زرنا, أنتم زرتم, أنتن زرتن, هم زاروا, هن زرنا. And نحن طرنا, أنتم طرتم, أنتن طرتن, هم طاروا, هن طرن. So there are a few hollow verbs that behave in the past like verbs with ya as the middle root letter, but which actually have va in the middle. One of the most common verb of this type is to sleep from the root letter nom, which is nama yanamu. So noun. Namat fi sarir, namat fi sariri ummiha. Namat, she slept, fi sariri, in the bed, sariri ummiha, bed of her mother. Nimtu, I slept, hatta as-sabah, hatta as-sabah. Nimtu hatta as-sabah, I slept till the morning. So from the table you might have noticed that there is a short vowel in the middle of hollow verbs when there is sukoon over the third root letter. This is a general rule for the hollow verbs and is worth remembering as it works for all types, tenses and forms of hollow verbs. So sukoon over the third root letter of a regular verb is equal to the short vowel in the middle of irregular hollow verb, and vowel over the third root letter of the regular verb is equal to long vowel in the middle of irregular hollow verb. Now we will discuss the hollow verbs in the present. So in the present tense, hollow verbs also follow the rules highlighted above. since the present tense usually has a vowel after the third root letter. This means that hollow verbs in this tense are characterized mainly by a long vowel in the middle. The difference is that whereas in the past the long vowel in the middle is always a long a, for example kana, in the present it is long e if the second root letter is ya, and usually a long u if the second root letter is va. For example, yazuru, he visits, from the root zur. We have yazuru, which means he visits, from the root zur. Yabiuna, which comes from bear, which means to sell. So verbs like nauma are the exception since they have a long a in the middle of the present. So nama yanamu, he sleeps. Yanamuna, they sleep. So now here is the complete table which shows some examples showing the three different types of hollow verb in the present, and they pay the most attention to the learning of the first two types. The third type has been included mainly for recognition. Notice that only less common feminine plurals have a sukoon over the third root letter and a short vowel in the middle. As in the past, this vowel depends on the middle root letter. So most verbs with va. Azuru, ana azuru, anta tazuru, anti tazurina, huwa yazuru, hiya tazuru, nahnu nazuru, antum تزورون أنتن تزورن هم يزورون هن يزورن. أنا أطير أنت تطير أنت تطيرين هو يطير هي تطير نحن نطير أنتم تطيرون أنتن تطيرن هم يطيرون هن يطيرن. So أنا أنام أنت تنام أنت تنامين هو ينام هي تنام نحن ننام أنتم تنامون أنتن تنمن هم ينامون هن ينمن. So نبيع المحدول للتجار الجملة, we sell the crops to the wholesalers. Or أنام كل يوم الساعة الثانية عشرة, I go to sleep, أنام, I sleep every day, كل يوم at الساعة الثانية عشرة, at 12 o'clock. So now we will discuss the vowel or ya as a third root letter. So this group of verb is sometimes also called as defective verb, and there are three main types: verb with va as the last root letter, verbs with ya as the last root letter and the fatha as the middle in the past, verbs with ya as the last root letter and the kathara in the middle vowel in the past. So in the past tense, the first two types are reasonably regular. Only the past of the verb for huwa, hiya and hum are irregular. From the root shaku, shaka, he complained. Shakat, she complained. Shaku, they complained. So from the root masha, masha, he walked. Mashat, she walked. Mashaw, they walked. So all of the irregular parts of these two types are pronounced the same. Only the difference is the spelling of shaka with the final alif and masha with the final ya without dots. So the difference between these two types of words are more apparent in the regular parts of the past. Shakautu, I complained, from the root shaku. Mashina, we walked, from the root masha. Ramaita, you threw, from the root rama. Rajutum, you requested or hoped, from the root raju. So most defective verbs follow one of the root patterns above. However, there are some verbs with ya as the last root letter and kathra as the middle that follow in the different pattern. Two common examples are nasiya, to forget, and laqiya, to meet. These verbs have a long e in main part of the past tense. Nasitu, which means I forgot. So the following table summarizes the past tenses from all three main types: defective 1, defective 2, and defective 3. For defective 1, we have shaka, which means to complain. Ana shakutu, anta shakuta, anti shakuti, huwa shaka, hiya shakat, nahnu shakuna, antum shakutum, antunna shakutunna, hum shaku, hunna shakun. The type 2, ana mashitu, anta mashita, anti mashiti, huwa masha, hiya mashat, nahnu mashina, antum mashitum, antunna mashitunna, hum mashaw, hunna mashina. So that was in the past tense, and now you can also go through the defective part type 3 by yourself. So it is on the screen. You can pause and take a look over here. And then we have similarly the present tenses of all these defective verbs, which you can go through in the present tense also. So I have them on the screen, and I'll pause over here so you can see. Here's the type 1, and then we have the type 2, and then we have the type 3. So notice that these defective verbs in the past present tense can usually be spotted because they have a long vowel instead of the third root letter. In type 1 there is a long u, yashku, for the present. In the type 2 there is a long e, yamshi. In the type 3 there is a long a, yansa. But notice this is written with alif maksura. So some of the changes that happen are not very logical and can be difficult to remember. Concentrate on most common parts first. Leave the parts feminine plural until you feel confident on the basic patterns. So here is the summary of everything that we have discussed. Weak verbs are those which have vav or ya as one of the root letters. There are three types of weak verbs: verbs with va or ya as the first root letter, verbs with va or ya as the second root letter, verbs with va or ya as the third root letter. And the first root letter verbs are mainly regular, except the first root letter always mostly drop out in the present tense. The hollow verbs, or having the second root word, they have a vowel in the middle instead of the second root letter. This is a short vowel if the third root letter has a sukoon over it, a long vowel if it does not. And then the third type was the defective verbs, which are characterized by a long vowel, u or e, or I or a instead of the third root letter, but do not always behave predictably. Each pattern should be learned individually. So I would request you all to memorize these types of irregular verbs, go through it, and by the end of our playlist for these videos, we'll have the top 400 verbs which are used in Arabic as a separate video, so that you can memorize them. So subscribe to the channel and comment if you have any question below. Ma'as salam.